This podcast will cover basic drawing and scene creation in Flash. To first launch Flash, once Flash launches, go up to the Workspace button and pull down to Developer, which makes it easier to work in the project window. Create a new project by going to the Project pull-down bar and pull down to New Project. Then name your project something. I'll name mine Carl Test Project, and click the Browse button to navigate to a folder you want to put it in. For example, I'll put mine on my work drive, and I'll create a new folder, and I'll just call it Flash Test. And click Create to create that folder, and then choose that as my root folder. ActionScript version will leave as ActionScript 3, and click Create Project. Following that, we need an actual project file, and to do that, we'll click this third icon here. We roll over it, it says New File. Once you have your new project, click on the New File button at the bottom of the project window and create a new file. We'll call this file Carl Test again. And then make sure you'll note that initially it comes off as a .as or an ActionScript file. Go ahead and click Flash File under File Type. So you go to the File Type button, click and pull down after a flash file, and click Create File. Once you create your Flash file, you can go up to the Workspace menu and pull down to Animator. That'll give you a little bit more room for your timeline and for your scene, and then we can start drawing. There are a couple of different tools for drawing in Flash. You certainly can build your characters out of polygons, using the rectangle tool, the oval tool, and so on. But the predominant tools we'll use will be the pencil tool and the brush tool. As soon as you click on the pencil tool, you'll notice that the pencil mode comes up, and also whether or not you're doing object drawing. For the moment, we'll leave object drawing turned off, and we'll leave our pencil mode in straighten. When we draw with our pencil mode of straighten, you'll see even though I don't draw a regular polygon, pencil mode in straighten will correct that polygon into something regular, an oval or a square. When I click into smooth mode, I can draw irregular polygons, and it'll just do slight changes to my curves so that it just sort of rounds out my curves and makes them a little more even. When I click in ink mode, now I pretty much get whatever I draw, as irregular as I draw. So if I want my lines to have that level of personality, exactly the way I'm drawing them, I'd want to use my pencil tool in ink mode. I'll grab this selection tool, select all of my drawings from this bit, and delete them. If I go ahead and grab the brush tool, you'll note that I get a series of modes or sort of extra tools for the brush tool. First of all, I get a qualifier called the brush shape, and I'm able to change the shape, the actual shape of the brush I'm drawing with. I'm going to grab a slightly larger brush size, which I can also change to illustrate that. So if I have the round brush shape, I get that. If I move down to a square brush shape, I get a straighter line. If I move down to a angled brush shape, then I get that. All right, once again, I'm going to delete those. And click back on the brush again. I also can choose whether or not to use pressure and tilt if I'm working with a pressure-sensitive tablet. Let me go ahead and grab a slightly larger brush size and then my regular round brush shape, and we'll draw a bit with the brush. When I draw a single stroke with the brush or paint in an area and then click on it with the subselection tool, you'll see that what I get is just a perimeter of that. So it actually is not a line like I get drawing with the pencil tool, but I actually get the outline of a shape. And even though I make strokes back and forth, I'll do it again. If I make a single stroke and then click on it, I have this as my perimeter. If I grab my brush tool and add to that with the same color and grab my subselection tool, you'll note that my shape has increased in size. So it isn't actually a series of strokes, but rather what I'm doing is adding to sort of the color mass or overall shape that I've initially drawn. So long as I'm drawing with the same color, that shape will grow. Even if I was to take that shape and move it over the top of the other shape and release it, it gets added to that shape. So now I have just one large shape. And I can go ahead and edit that shape any way I want by moving these anchor points and moving these end points and curve adjustments and so on. But I'm still dealing with one mass of color. If I go back to the brush tool and was to change my color to, say, white, and paint over it in white, I'm actually just adding another shape. So if I take this shape, I can edit and change my white shape here in the center. And my blue shape. Now if I was to grab the blue and move it, I can click on it with my selection tool and move the entire unit. And then once again, clicking on my subselection tool, you'll notice that I've lost, oh, I haven't. I have my white shape still here. Okay, still here in the center. Okay, once I move my blue shapes, I move them away, but my white shape remains, as you can see, even when I select it just as dots. I'm going to delete the white shape and leave my two blue shapes intact. I'm going to grab my selection tool and delete all the drawings in this frame and talk a little bit about keyframes. In my first layer, my initial frame has a circle at the bottom of the rectangle signifying what's populating this frame. That indicates that this frame is actually a keyframe. You'll recall a keyframe means a change, and certainly I want to go from nothingness or blank frames to having my first drawing in the frame, so I need a keyframe to signify a change. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and draw a circle that I'll animate. And I'm also going to draw a penciled ground line, or maybe I'll use the brush tool and draw a ground line that I can bounce off of. Okay, so now in this frame, I have both of these drawings in this keyframe. Now often it makes the most sense to use multiple layers. So what I'm going to do is double click on this layer and I'll call this one ball. And I'll make sure that just my ball is in there. I'm going to select my ground line. I'm going to copy that by going up to Edit, Copy. And then I'm going to delete it by going up to Edit, Cut. Then I'm going to insert a new layer by clicking on a new layer right here. And I'm going to call that layer Ground Line. Okay, I'm going to put the ground line. I can move my layers by grabbing one and just pulling it below the ball. And then I'm going to go up to Edit, Paste in Place, and that'll put my ground line in there. So now, if I was to click on the visibility icon and make my ball layer invisible, you can see that the ball disappears. If I made my ground line invisible, you can see the ground line disappears. I'm going to lock my ground line layer so that I don't mess with it, and I'm just going to work with the ball layer. Move that down just a bit. Okay, so you can see now I have these two layers. I'm going to take my ground line layer, unlock it, and then extend this or add frames, and I can do that by either control clicking on it and saying Insert Frames. Another way I can do it is going up to Insert Timeline Frame, Or the third way, and I'm going to do that way next, is by utilizing the quick key command F5. So if I hold down the F5 key, I can keep clicking F5 and add as many frames as I want. So I'll have my ground line persist here out to frame 20. So you can see as soon as I leave frame 1, my ball disappears because it's no longer persisting. That drawing is no longer persisting. These are blank frames after frame 1. But my ground line persists up to frame 20. And then you can see in frame 21, I can't go there, but if I was to go to frame 21, it actually disappears from frame 21. So if I want my ball to persist, I can do one of two things. I can either insert another frame here and have the ball persist, but I want to animate my ball, so I'm going to insert another keyframe, and I do that by going into the next frame and say Insert Timeline Keyframe, or I can also just type in F6. Now, because these are two different keyframes, I can insert a change here. So we'll go into the second frame, and I'm going to move that ball down a bit, say just a bit, down to there. I'm going to go into the next frame and insert another keyframe. I'm going to pull that ball down to here, maybe just before it hits. Okay, go into the next frame, F6, and now I'm going to start to squish this. So I'm going to grab my subselection tool, and I'm going to bring this down. Actually, what we'll do is not use subselection, but we'll use the free transform tool. All right. I'll move the ball down a bit, and then we'll go into the, maybe we'll squish it just a little bit at first. Go into the next frame, F6. I hit F5, Command Z, hit F6, and then squish it some more. And go into the next frame, F6, and squish it some more. Now, the reason, certainly I could begin to tween this in a way just because this ball is just falling, but what this allows me to do is actually go in frame by frame. Okay, I've got it shifted over a bit. I can go in frame by frame and mess with this ball and continue on doing that. I went ahead and added a few more frames here, and so now my ball bounces down and then starts to come back up. And I'm going to show you another method called tweening for creating animation in Flash. To do that, I'm going to click on a frame, click on this keyframe here, and then type F5 to add a bunch of frames. Say we'll add maybe out to frame 17. Then in frame 17, I'm going to click F6 to add a keyframe. And then I'm going to bring my ball shape, and I'm going to hold down the Shift key and move it up so that it moves, let's see, moves up there. Now what I'm going to do is click in the center in any frame, and I'm going to Control click and then create a shape tween. You'll see that my path here turns into an arrow, and my ball actually animates here with what's called a tween. So I set this keyframe, this change, then I set this keyframe further through my persistent path of my ball and moved my ball up, which indicates a second change. And then what Flash is doing is interpolating the frames between those to create the animation. Here I have frame by frame animation until I hit frame 10, and then from there I have a tweened animation out to frame 17. So that's a little bit of an overview of a couple of different ways to animate in Flash, and certainly in every frame here where I was utilizing my ball, I could very easily be drawing frames. The last thing I want to cover is a little bit about working in the the timeline. You have things like onion skinning, onion skin outlines, edit multiple frames, and modify onion skin markers. For onion skinning, when I turn onion skinning on, and I can pull these two markers to adjust exactly what my onion skin is covering, I can see the previous and next drawings as I move through my timeline. Okay, in that area where I am, I can see the previous and next drawings, and those drawings show up as gray boxes, okay, or gray drawings with the silhouettes. If I turn on onion skin outlines, I just see the outlines of the drawings in the previous and next frames. And they fade back. It may be a little hard to see on a podcast, but they fade back in terms of value to show me which ones are next and which ones are previous. I can also turn on Edit Multiple Frames, which allows me to select whole ranges of drawings. Let's say I wanted to select all of the drawings in this particular element. I could click on the first keyframe, then hold down the Shift key and click on the last keyframe, and actually edit or move all of those drawings at one time. And this allows me to have tremendous control over everything within the entire timeline. It's a dangerous thing to mess with because because I can change everything all at once. So you need to be careful with that. But that is one way to kind of move whole elements or multiple frames of drawings at one time. The last thing I want to cover in Flash is the scene menu, and that's shown by this icon here. What you can do with this is actually create multiple scenes in Flash, and when you export your movie, Flash will export all the frames in each scene sequentially. That is, if I have frames 1 through 10 in scene 1, and then 11 through 20 in scene 2, then I can actually, when I export the movie, it'll export scene 1, followed by scene 2, followed by scene 3, and compile the whole thing into one movie. So it creates a way for me to organize my frames in Flash. To get a new scene, I simply click on the Add Scene button, and I'll get a second scene. And you can see in my timeline, I have a blank timeline and a blank stage. If I go back to scene 1, I have my drawings and my timeline from the first scene, all the things I've been creating. If I go into scene 2, let's say, and I drew, let's say not an oval but a rectangle, and I'm going to change the color to blue so you can see that. And then we'll go ahead and have this persist for a bunch of frames. And then I'll click in frame 20 and add a keyframe, and then move this over to the side, and then insert a shape tween for that. And then if I went to test my movie and click test, you'll see that I'll have my bouncing followed by my blue movie. So what Flash did is when it went to export, it exported all the frames that I had in scene 1, followed by all the frames that I had in scene 2 sequentially. So this would be an easy way to organize your animated films so that you could keep track of this and then go and add frames. If I added frames into the first scene, then Flash would naturally export still all of the frames, including the new ones, in scene 1 before it would export scene 2, but it would compile them all into a single movie. So this is a good organizational tool. So in this podcast, we covered a bit of drawing, a couple of the drawing tools in Flash, a couple of ways to animate, how to add frames, add keyframes, and add and build on your scenes.